Ooh, sorry, a technical thing going on here. Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Jack Tringali. Tringali.
Yes.
And we're here to discuss about his interesting life and his poetry. Jack Tringali is a rad restaurant owner as well as a rad poet. And not owner, I should say, not a
Run
consultant,
restaurants,
right?
restaurant manager.
Manager, right,
Yes.
as well as a poet, is a focus on the intersection of technology and human interaction. And his poetry, he has a new book of poetry called Poetry from the Neon Apocalypse, right?
Poetry for the Neon Apocalypse.
Right. And so what brings you? You were in LA for 20 years. What brings you here back to the Boston area?
Boston is my home city.
Fires, maybe, right? No.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'd seen the fires at one point
Yeah.
from one of the restaurants I was running. Boston is my home city. And every time that I've traveled outside of it, I've lived in a couple different cities up and down the East Coast and the West Coast. My family and friends I hear the call, I hear the pull back to Boston, and I love the city very, very much.
Is it different than LA? That's a
It is
rhetorical question.
absolutely
Yeah.
different than LA in lifestyle, in the type of people that are here. The number of people that are in Los Angeles that were born in Los Angeles is something like 10%. And everyone else is the best looking people from all the small cities across America, and trying to make it in one thing or another. No, here in Boston, it's much more working class, and I like that.
You like the mix?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I like
Yeah.
getting a lot of different sides, a lot of different perspectives.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I know you've run restaurants and pubs, right?
Yes,
And I don't know if you're familiar with the magazine Plowshares,
I am.
and you're familiar with the bar Plow and Stars, right?
Yes, I am. I'm familiar with that too, and they book live music there too.
Yeah. Now, they started Plow. I interviewed DeWitt Henry. They started Plowshares in that pub, and actually Henry told me that in Ireland there's a big history of magazines being started in pubs. I mean, what do you think about a pub and poetry and what do you think of that environment? You think it's conducive to that?
I think that historically it was very conducive to that. That's where the community would get together to share the day's events and, well, here in Boston, plot revolutions. So I find that very, very, it makes me very happy. And I like to see more and more of that. There is some poetry that's happening in the bars and restaurants around here. Over the past 10 years, it tends towards slam poetry because that seems to be a style people like. Not my favorite, but to each their own. Myself, I've performed over at Aeronaut Brewing.
Oh, I've done that too.
With a couple
Yeah.
of people there. That's
A little controversy over there, I hear. Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
One of my housemates is the manager of Aeronaut Brewing.
So I'm sure you heard about it.
I heard about it. But Aeronaut's an interesting place to do poetry because there's always 5 or 6 events going on there at the same time. There's like some music in one room. There's people having conversations over here. There's like a running group that just finished something there. And then you're up there trying to do poetry and trying to get some people's attention, maybe not all of them. It's an interesting environment to do.
Now, you say you focus on the intersection of technology and human interaction. Perhaps you can enlighten us a bit about that.
Yeah, my background's in computer science.
Where'd you go?
Rensselaer Polytechnic
Okay.
Institute in upstate New York.
Fine school.
Upstate. Yeah, it was a fantastic school. Although I love Boston, I wanted to be a little bit removed from it. I spent the first 18 years of my life here, and I was one of the few people in my group of friends that wanted to leave Boston and see other parts of the world. And I figured, well, Rensselaer is far enough away. I could always come back and visit if I get a little homesick. But it's far enough. It was like my first step out of Boston, and I'm very glad I took it. There, I did get the computer science degree, but what really started getting me jazzed was they had a minor in electronic arts, which allowed me to take a creative writing course, a computer music course, visual arts kind of things. Now, back in the day, all that meant was learning like the newest software that was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, back in the day, it was like the first version of everything, so everything broke all the time. But it was working within limitations of computers and trying to figure out the best user interfaces for things, and I found that very exciting. Like Laurie Anderson and some of the work that she's done, that they've done, has been fantastic in just interaction between robotic computers, digital world, and our analog.
I'm reminded of. I was talking to Lloyd Schwartz, you know the poet Lloyd Schwartz.
I remember the name.
Yeah,
of it.
and he did a with Todd Markover at MIT did a robot opera. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was critically panned, but
Yeah, but it sounds like something I would love to go to.
I know you probably like it. Yeah,
That sounds absolutely amazing.
Schwartz wrote the libretto for it. Yeah, it was at the Emerson, I think. Now, you for the poems for the Neon Apocalypse
Yes.
came out in 2019, and it was nominated for an Elgin Award
Yes.
by the Science Fiction Association. So tell us about the award and how does this fit in the genre of science fiction? Your book.
It's interesting that there is an association that's called the Science Fiction Poetry Association. So it's a niche within a niche. It is a writing niche, and then a poetry niche, and then a science fiction poetry niche. So there's a group of speculative poets that they would call themselves, and they write within fantasy and sci-fi genres, but in poetic forms. I was looking back when I put this collection together to be placed into a book or into a manuscript at the time. I was just looking over the work I'd done over the past 5 or 6 years. And I'd never put a book together before. I looked back to see what themes there were, because I wanted to put everything, I didn't want it to be just completely random. And I saw that there was a lot of information, there was a lot of themes around music and Boston and pubs and science and technology. And basically some apocalyptic work in there. I think I counted it up, and I killed the universe over a number of times.
Well, I mean, you're influenced by cyberpunk, which is sort of a dystopian society that is run by nefarious computers or something. Am I right or wrong on that?
No, you're right. This came out of movements in like the late 1980s, early 1990s. William Gibson is one of the primary authors in the cyberpunk group. But there's a number of others.
Philip K. Dick, would he be considered?
Philip K. Dick, absolutely.
Yeah, he's
at
great.
least a precursor to that.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly. And so all of that formed into, I guess, for modern audiences, if you point to the Matrix movies and things like that, that's where a lot of people would see cyberpunk these days.
Okay. Now, I was reading one of your poems that was actually in Boston City Hall, right?
That's right. I have one poem up in Boston City Hall.
And it's inside Boston. It's about a Salem parlor.
It is.
And I was noticing it's sort of, I don't know, this is my read of it. It is sort of a condemnation of popular culture in comparison to the alchemy or magic of the world.
Yes. I wrote that specifically for one of my friends that runs, that is a tattoo artist right now up in Salem. A witchy sort of woman. And I wrote it so that people would understand that up in Salem, there's a group of people that truly believe, not so much in the witchcraft and things like that you might see in television and popular culture, with spells to make money or spells to gain love, but just more of the natural things that happen in life that go beyond coincidences. And how a lot of people go, and they're tourists up there. So this is the intersection between the tourists and the people that actually live, say, in Salem.
Okay.
Yes, and their view of them.
Yeah, there was resentment there also, but it seemed that, I mean, there was a deeper level of, there was a deeper level to the witch or whatever was practicing in the parlor.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole that came about when I saw, like I said, but she was sitting around with 4 other friends at the end of a shift at one of the restaurants I was working at in Alston. And they I was going about my work, and they were getting together, and it looked like a coven to me.
Oh yeah.
It looked like a coven of women that were having beers and having a great time, and they were cackling into the midnight, and I was very scared of what was happening over there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But very excited by it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, after growing up in New England, this is a quote, after growing up in New England, you never wants to see another poem about a tree or pond. So you're not a nature poet, huh?
I'm not.
Neither
so
am
much
I,
a
for that
nature
matter.
poet.
But I
No,
mean,
no, neither are you. Neither are you.
All right.
You have poets. You have poems. Lots of poems about Boston. You have a book about poems.
About what?
About Boston.
Yeah, I love that's
In
Boston.
urban
I
life.
love
And
Boston.
Sure,
Yes.
there used to be apple orchards all over here, but they're not anymore.
yeah,
You don't have
right.
to write about them. Yeah, growing up in New England and taking poetry classes here and there, and you look historically, yeah, there's a lot of poems about trees and bark and you know, the symbols. I want to stay away from the traditional symbols that are in poetry. Someone came up with the idea recently, I can't remember who it was, about making a collection of a poetry collection, and the poetry collection would be called Not a Door, and every poem in that collection would have a door. At some point, the poem would have a door in it that represented something else, because that's just it is a trope that is used very constantly. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Now, I was going to. Well, you know, you do have about a lot of time actually.
Yeah.
To read from your work, but maybe you can start off with the poem that was in City Hall.
I'd be glad to.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I can do that. This poem is called Inside a Salem Parlor, and the one that went up in City Hall has been edited.
Okay. Why?
There are swear words in this.
Oh, all right, right. Yeah. Well, when we run the Boston National Poetry Festival, we have to, you know, someone came up and talked about putting a crucifix in her genital area.
Really?
And we got into trouble for that, right? It was a good poem, but...
I'd love to find out who that was. Yeah, and actually, when every year Boston City Hall puts up a group of poems in there, and check out the website to find out how to do that. And they had an inauguration for that, and they invited the poets down. They happened to give us 24 hours to do it. They said, "Come on down tomorrow, and we're going to do this thing." And as much of us could get over there did that, and they gave us a microphone and allowed us to read these poems out in City Hall. And I did this unedited version because I knew they weren't going to throw me out at that point.
Okay.
Inside a Salem Parlor. You will not fuck with the goddess. Goddamn hoodie-wearing child and her friends. My red wounds of slaughter will spill over your broken rabbit's foot. No, you can't get a neck tattoo, princess, and there is no such thing as the modern vampire. Precious, just shop and applaud yourself in my parlor. Buy that bundle of wildwood sage to bring home and burn next to your picket fence, skyscraper condo, Euro cottage, sub-zero fridge, whatever. I've got work to do. My practice skills linger, occult and otherwise. You continue to cackle as your manicures dare to touch my grimoire, my folio, the scented candles that we really made in the summer backyard, as the ladies laughed darkly. Tell your cheering nuggets to sit the fuck down, follow your mama's tramp stamp and exit, take your Maldi kit with you, back on the bus, fucking tourist, light up that clove cigarette, whatever. I've got lots of work to do. Thank you.
Okay, I like it. And there's a lot of your sentences, your lines are very full of images and things like that. They're not something that you know. They're not. Sometimes people work in short lines, but it seems for the most part that you work, from what I've read.
I did. There was a period where I was working in longer and longer lines and less abstract, more concrete.
Yeah.
And that is definitely from that period. Although it's fun to write in other styles too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Have you had any poetic influences that you?
I go to the library at least once every 2 weeks or so, and invariably I check out a poetry book. I've been reading lately. Help me if I say the name incorrectly. Kim Adonisio.
Okay.
is one of the ones I've been reading lately. And I actually I was up in Portland, Maine, just hours ago, and there's a lot of used bookstores.
Oh, yeah.
And I was super happy to find one that had a whole selection, 300, 400, 500 books of poetry books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Price $1 to $10.
Wow.
And so I picked up a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Sadly, in my normal life, I don't talk about poetry very often. There's not that many poets in my life. There's more musicians and sculptors and things like that. So I might talk about themes or words or language, but the actual poets themselves, I tend to forget because I don't say their names often enough.
Well, I know, there's a process to writing poetry. For everyone has their different process. I know, for instance, I remember I was out in I teach at Bunker Hill, one of the colleges I teach at, and I was out in the parking lot, and suddenly this image came of I don't know if you've ever seen it, The Friends of Eddie Coyle.
Yes,
yeah, it's
absolutely.
great movie.
Yeah.
And it's reminded me of a scene from there with the trains and the parking lot and suddenly I just thought, what I usually do is I sort of get in a chanting kind of thing where I'm chanting out lines and images are coming to me, and I'll quickly write it down in my little book. How about you? How do you go about writing of a poem? Is it just different all the time, or?
It certainly does change, and I'm sure it does for you too. But I always do have something to write on.
Mm-hmm. I always have, yeah.
Yeah, whether it's electronic or a pen and paper.
Mm-hmm.
Even before I was doing poetry, I always had something to write on. Partially because I don't trust my brain.
Yeah.
But also, when I was living in Los Angeles, I was talking with some screenwriters out there, and that's how they did it. And I was like, that's brilliant. Of course, I should be doing that anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I will write down if I hear a phrase, if I'm in a bar and I see something that's interesting to me, I'll write that down. And eventually I have a Word document on my laptop that's just called Next Idea. And I've had it for years, and it grows and grows and grows. It's probably 26 pages or so right now. And I cull those ideas and I start forming a poem, and the poem may form, it may half form, it may never form, but that's my stirring pot.
Okay.
And then once it gets to a point where I feel like it's been sculpted and finished,
right,
another word can't be added or removed or moved around,
right,
then it goes into a different file.
Okay.
And then I kind of leave it like that and move on to the next thing.
Read some more. You have plenty of
I'd be
time.
glad to.
You have like 12 minutes.
I have a question for you. When you're teaching, or even just for yourself, do you find that between the written word and speaking out loud, do you change any of your poems?
In terms of wordage?
Or let me ask you this: when you write a poem, do you consider speaking out loud, or are you considering someone just reading it?
Oh, I'm always looking for sound and things like that. So it's very music and
Right.
poetry. Poetry should have musicality, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm always. I mean, it's like all these things are going, but I'm chanting. That's why I'm chanting, because there is a music.
It's oratory, and
yeah.
it's and just like with comedy.
Well, I mean, there are some poets who are tremendous on the stage, but if you read them on the page, it's not as good.
In the opposite, I think.
Yeah. So.
But I think of it as an oratory thing, and when I am up on a stage, it's usually not so much a stage, but I'm up on, like, I'm at the Midway Dive Bar or something like that, or I'm at Aaron.
Yeah, I saw that picture of you on
Yeah, so
yeah.
I open up for like punk bands in the area, and it's fun, and it's fantastic, and the people there really vibe what I'm doing. They really enjoy it. But I will change certain words to catch people's attention from the written page to what I say, and I don't know if I'm cheating when I'm doing that, but it's interesting to me.
No, not at all. No cheating in poetry. Poetic
There's no
license.
cheating. Was the poetry rules? Who wrote that book? This is the first poem from the book. It's called Invisible Ink, and it hits a lot of the themes that are later on throughout the book.
Okay.
It is not widely known, but God has a tattoo. She got it when she was a young anarchist and bored of the endless. The tattoo started as one elegant equation, then transformed into a candle, bloomed into a colorful zoo of particles, and coalesced into droplets of universes. Once the tattoo was finished, it was unchangeable. Inevitably, it faded as God's interests went elsewhere.
Great. I focused on a tattoo and a poem that I wrote recently also, yeah.
Really? How did? Do you have any tattoos?
Oh, I don't have a phone, no. But,
I don't have any tattoos either.
you don't? Oh.
No, I don't. Although I had someone write on me earlier today.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So maybe I'll make that into a
Yeah,
tattoo.
no. But, no, I did. It was on Carson Beach. There's a guy with a tattoo. I wrote about him. It was an old time tattoo, and it's sort of like
the old Flash
not like a New Age planet or something like that.
Nothing
He was
tribal.
He was an old timer. But anyway, yeah, keep reading. Yeah,
I tend to hang around with like I said, musicians
Yeah.
here in the area, so they have tattoos and piercings, and the people that I am that are very good friends of mine have tattoos and piercings. I have just the one piercing. I have no tattoos currently.
Do you know Aja, the Turkish queen?
I do not know Aja, the Turkish
Turkish
queen.
queen.
Tell
She
me
says-
about Aja, the Turkish queen.
No, that's not. Or I'm just saying, Jennifer Matthews. Have you ever heard of her?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. All right. Well,
These
keep
things
reading
I
from
will
your
get.
poem.
Okay, excellent. But I know there's a show here that's filmed here on Wednesdays. That's the Heavy Leather Topless Dance Party.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, he has a gray beard. Yeah.
yeah,
With
absolutely.
the hat.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me. Moving on. All right, so a little bit about climate change, and
Okay. Don't
And we
say
have-
those words. Right.
it doesn't exist then. We have in the background we have the evening, and it is snow outside. And I wrote this during the big blizzard that we had
A couple of years
4 or
ago.
5 years ago,
Wow, unbelievable.
when Boston just shut down. As sky falls. In the early evening, man finally retires to turtle houses retracting into defensive position, bundled, swaddled soft bodies, across from frosted window and frozen concrete. Storms have ebbed and flowed. Warnings have come and gone. And man cares no more. The remaining night will end. The end remains nigh. Seize this measly civilization for its falsehood. Sleet builds up around each house. Each snowflake a death knell of casual annihilation. From inside structures of folly, warmth is gently relinquished. From foggy souls with little wonder left, the lights go out and man falls asleep. The old sadness comes again, the last blizzard ever seen as sky falls. Thank you.
Nice. It's funny, blizzards are good for poetry, actually, because when you're stuck in the house, and I
Blizzards,
wrote
nor'easters?
a whole little book that was
Yes.
published, just reminiscing about Boston when I was, here in the '70s as a college student and all that, and I sort of like had a feverish type of,
Really?
because it was, I was just stuck in the house, and
Right.
and just,
Somewhere it would be an interesting library to put together poetry books where people were stuck in places and
Yeah,
had
yeah.
to do things like prisons
Yeah.
or the Red Line. I know one person that wrote an entire book. It's called Train of Thought,
Yeah.
and it was all entirely
great
written,
title. Yeah.
entirely written on the Red Line.
Yeah, yeah. A lot you can see on the red line. Yeah. Lay another one on us. You have
Yes, sir.
about 4 minutes.
Wonderful. This is for my friend Anna. This one is titled Nina Religion. She supernaturally met me at a Peruvian restaurant in the middle of the day. It had rained earlier, and the heavens had opened up to reveal a determined blue. The sun was a round disk, white and afire. Sitting across the most beautiful angel, a waiter approached. I did not care. Pure, bracing water was poured, and I could not pay attention. She was talking nonchalantly, and I was talking nonsense. But the sound was muffled, and no words were recorded. She wore an ebony ankh, and maybe a white blouse. I couldn't be sure now. Her skin glowed as if she had just finished dancing. I imagined her lithe frame gracing a ballet. She lifted her head and finally met me. The ankh looked like it was burned or branded directly into her innocent neckline. Her smoky eyes looked up to me, and her voice intoned, "The most intimate thing you can do to someone else is cut them. The next 8 months were a blur, and she is gone now. I am left with my scars. I am left with my knives. Thank you.
Very beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nina Religion was actually the name of a religious shop in Los Angeles on Mosher.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I never walked inside of it, but it was one of those things that just Nina Religion. That's going into a poem somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That title. Yeah. Go ahead. Still have about 2 minutes. Short one.
Short one.
Well, no, actually, you got about 2.5 minutes. So.
Okay. Okay. This one's a little sexier. This is called I Sip Campari from Your Left Eye. I sip Campari from your left eye, unclothed yet inhibited. Your beauty lies sacred before me, more nude than naked. I sip Chambord from your right eye. The house of Madame Frances holds appetite and fantasy for this eve's sinful rites. I sip Chartreuse from your left ear. Now, let's not be craven. Shallow dives to wet the tongue, oral exploration. I sip Vermouth from your right ear. Your nervous giggles abate. My dating needs are fickle in this hellfire club. I sip Absinthe from your left nostril. Be still now as the flower abides to the bee, your petals aflutter. I sip Fernet from your right nostril. They sting the nose. May feel deceiving, the warmth is friend, not foe. I sip Genever from your mouth. Share with me this eau de vie, our lives and lips locked. I sip whiskey from your cloaca. You whisper a low sound, animalistic, my carnal vessel.
Wow.
I sip brandy from your labia. Your ceremony ends, sweet ninth orifice, now drunk and seeking remedy. Thank you.
I'll drink to that. Yeah.
That was based off of, there was a brothel in Hollywood in the 30s called the House of Madame Frances. Mm-hmm. And she would travel the world to find the latest sexual rituals. And that was one that she found in France, in which they would drink a little bit of liquor from the woman's 9 different orifices.
I prefer chilled glass, but you know.
Back bar's right over here. I'll be glad to buy you a drink.
So what's coming up next for you?
I had just finished writing a second manuscript that is